Hi everyone, welcome to Eco Learning Classes. This is Professor Geeta Mahesh. Dear students, let us discuss an interesting and important concept, the movement along the demand curve. As we all know that demand for X good is a function of price of X good, price of relative good, income of the consumer and taste and preference of the consumer. Keeping all other things remaining constant, that is price of relative good, income and taste and preference of the consumer. Any change in the price leads to change in quantity demand. This we call it as demand function. Demand function can be expressed. Demand for X good is a function of price of X good. So there will be a functional relationship between price of a good and demand for that particular good. As I told, demand function is a relationship between quantity of the good and its price when other things remaining constant. Here price of relative good, income of the consumer and taste and preference of the consumer keeping constant. If price changes, demand for that particular product also changes. So demand curve is a graphical representation of demand function. When you bring a graphical relationship between demand for a good and price of its good, then we call it as demand curve. Any change in price leads to movement along the demand curve, assuming that other things remaining constant. This is also known as ceteris paribus in economics. It means that other things being equal, other things being same or other things remaining constant, we call it as ceteris paribus. Dear students, let us understand movement along the demand curve with the help of a diagram. You can see in the diagram on x-axis quantity demanded and on y-axis price is measured. You can see two arrow mark, one arrow mark moving upward, another one is downward. If demand curve moves up or down, this we call it as movement along the demand curve. Let us assume the price of product is P and the quantity demanded at price P is Q. If price of a product increases, then the quantity demanded will decrease from Q to Q2. This leads to movement of demand curve upwards. This we call it as situation of contraction of demand. If price decreases from P to P1, the quantity demanded will increases. Then demand curve moves downwards. This movement we call it as extension of demand. So, movement along the demand curve refers to extension or contraction of demand. Dear students, let us discuss shift in demand. As already we discussed, there are different determinants of demand. Demand for X is a function of price of X, price of relative good, income of the consumer, taste and preference of the consumer. Other things remaining constant, if price changes, leads to movement along the demand curve. If you keep price constant and any one of its determinant changes, then that leads to shift in demand. So what I want to say here, except price, any change in one of the other determinants of demand leads to shift in demand curve. So what are the other determinants of demand? Price of relative good, income of the consumer, taste and preference of the consumer. Keeping other things remaining constant, any one of the determinants are going to change, then leads to shift in demand. There are two types of shifts in demand. The first one is increase in demand, second one is decrease in demand. Dear students, now let us discuss increase in demand. So, if other determinants of demand changes, there will be a shift in demand. Let us discuss one after the other which causes increase in demand. That means demand curve will shift towards the right side. Let us assume that income of the consumer is going to change. Here we have taken demand for X good as a normal goods. When income of the consumer increases, the quantity demand for normal goods also increases. So, demand curve will shift towards the right side. Now, just consider the price of relative good. Here I have taken a substitute goods. If the price of substitute goods, the good example are coffee and tea. Here I am going to consider the price of tea increases, then tea becomes costlier. So, then definitely demand for coffee increases, which leads to increase in demand. So, demand curve will shift from DD to D2, D2. Now, let us consider the taste and preference of the consumer. If the taste and preference of the consumer is in favor, then demand for X good increases. So, demand curve will shift towards the right side. So, this we call it as increase in demand. Dear students, let us discuss decrease in demand. So, as already we discussed increase in demand. Now, let us discuss what are the reasons or when demand curve will shift towards the left side. The first one is income of the consumer. Demand for normal goods decreases when income of consumer decreases. So, when income of consumer decreases, demand for normal goods decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. Consider price of relative goods. Here we have taken a substitute. So, if we consider price of tea and the price of tea decreases, demand for coffee decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. Now, consider taste and preference of the consumer. When the taste and preference of the consumer is not in favor, then demand for that particular good decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. This we call it as decrease in demand. Dear students, movement along the demand curve and shift in demand is very important for 6 marks. So, you can make use of this notes. Dear students, next topic isoquants. Dear students, if you like, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.